Imagine a queen so formidable that she refused to kneel before an invading power. Picture her arriving at peace talks seated on the back of her servant, forcing the Portuguese governor to look her eye to eye. This, friends, is Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba, an astute diplomat, a brilliant strategist, and a legendary warrior who outwitted Portugal's might in the 17th century. You may have heard of European monarchs who resisted invaders, but few know Nzinga's story, rooted in the heart of what is now Angola. Her unshakable resolve to preserve her people's sovereignty, even under the weight of overwhelming colonial pressure, makes her one of history's most inspiring yet overlooked figures. Today, I invite you on a journey through her life, from her royal upbringing in Ndongo to her alliances with Mbande warriors, and finally her enduring legacy that still resonates across Africa and beyond. By the end of this video, you'll understand how Nzinga's combination of diplomacy, faith, and sheer tenacity enabled her to protect her kingdoms when others might have crumbled. Stay with me and make sure to subscribe to the history of the world. The untold chapters of our shared past await. Nzinga was born around 1583 into the royal family of Ndongo, a kingdom strategically located along the Kwanza River, where trade routes link the interior of Central Africa to the coast controlled by Portuguese traders seeking ivory, copper, and enslaved people. As the daughter of King Angola Kilawanji and Queen Kangala, Nzinga was raised in palace corridors suffused with political intrigue and military urgency. Ndongo had already suffered multiple Portuguese incursions, and its leaders were jockeying for internal supremacy as much as for survival against a European power with superior firearms and naval capacity. From her earliest years, Nzinga demonstrated an uncanny ability to absorb and master the customs of her people. She learned hunting, tracking, and warfare alongside male relatives, training under veteran generals who recognized her exceptional aptitude. As a princess, she witnessed how her father had to balance forging alliances with neighboring Congo nobles against the steadily encroaching Portuguese, who sought to assert their dominance over the lucrative Angolan trade networks. When she was still in her 20s, her elder brother, the heir to the throne of Ndongo, died under suspicious circumstances. Some sources hint at internal betrayal, leaving a power vacuum that Nzinga skillfully navigated by claiming both her royal lineage and her strategic insights into Portuguese intentions. In 1623, she was appointed as king's envoy to negotiate with the Portuguese governor in Luanda, a mission that would become legendary. Upon arriving, she refused to kneel, knowing that to do so would mark a loss of sovereignty. Instead, she directed one of her attendants to kneel and acted as his throne, thus forcing the Portuguese to recognize her dignity. This act of deft symbolism earned her respect and fear from both her own people and the colonizers. When her brother died later that year, Nzinga seized the throne herself, an unprecedented move in a patriarchal society, declaring herself king rather than queen to emphasize her authority. Despite coronations often steeped in ritual, she adopted protocols that underscored both her lineage and her unique position as a female monarch in a male-dominated hierarchy. By 1624, at the age of around 41, Queen Nzinga wielded political clout not because she was a woman, but because she demonstrated relentless political acumen. She immediately began to centralize Ndongo's army, reorganizing troop deployments along the reflective waters of its riverine borders to thwart Portuguese supply lines, and she commissioned the construction of fortified villages in strategically defensible terrain. Meanwhile, she embarked on a rigorous diplomacy campaign to speak directly with neighboring Congo and Kikongo chiefs, securing temporary non-aggression pacts by offering marriage alliances, monetary tributes, or trade concessions. An intricate tapestry of diplomatic maneuvers intended to keep her enemies divided. By the time she declared Ndongo's independence from Portuguese suzerainty in 1626, she had already laid the groundwork for a resilient resistance network, blending traditional Bakongo spiritual council with European military intelligence gleaned from those who had been to Luanda. This foundation, to combine indigenous tactics with selective adoption of European weaponry, became the bedrock upon which she would build her unrelenting struggle. Through a combination of keen political foresight, bold symbolism, and consolidation of internal forces, Nzinga rose from princess to sovereign ruler of a kingdom besieged on all sides, forging an identity that transcended gender norms and colonial intimidation. In so doing, she set a precedent for African female leadership that reverberates even centuries later. Once Nzinga secured her throne, the stakes intensified. Portuguese militia, commanded by Governor João Correia de Sousa, encroached ever deeper into Ndongo's territory, targeting lucrative inland trade routes and imposing draconian taxes on local chiefs. Understanding that sheer brute force could not defeat an adversary with superior firepower, Nzinga turned to diplomacy, faith, and strategic alliances to level the playing field. In 1626, she agreed to be baptized into the Catholic faith, adopting the Christian name Dona Ana de Sousa, not out of spiritual conversion alone, but as a calculated political maneuver. By presenting herself as a devout Catholic monarch, she earned the nominal allegiance of Jesuit missionaries in Luanda, who became channels of information and to some extent hindered Portuguese military zeal, arguing that persecuting a baptized queen might offend the crown's conscience. Yet her conversion did not temper her defiance. She continued to assert Ndongo's sovereignty while subtly subverting Portuguese expectations. As tensions escalated, when peace treaties stipulating tributes and hostage exchanges repeatedly failed, Nzinga recognized a more radical option, aligning with the Mbande, a fierce warrior society notorious for their mobile armies and unconventional tactics. Initially despised by neighboring Bakongo populations for their reputed brutality, the Mbangala became invaluable allies for Nzinga after she offered them sanctuary and integrating them into her forces in exchange for their loyalty. Through marriage alliances, she wed Angola Quilombo, Kia Kasenda, an Mbangala warlord. She wove a robust network that combined Ndongo's traditional infantry, Mbangala shock troops skilled in guerrilla warfare, and Portuguese deserters impressed by her leadership. Meanwhile, she communicated with the Dutch West India Company, which was also at war with Portugal, inviting them to establish a trading post upstream in enemy territory. In 1641, a handful of Dutch ships arrived, trading firearms and munitions in exchange for granting the Dutch exclusive rights to export ivory and slaves from Matamba. This unexpected alliance forced the Portuguese to fight on two fronts, draining their resources. Nzinga's armies, buoyed by Mbangala cavalry and Dutch-supplied muskets, carried out daring nighttime raids on fortified Portuguese outposts near Maxima, sometimes using flood season to move troops swiftly down the Kwango and Kwanza rivers in canoes. These tactics inflicted significant casualties, compelling the Portuguese to retreat to Luanda's perimeters. In 1631, Nzinga launched a bold campaign. She personally led a contingent of 10,000 troops, comprising Ndongo loyalists, Mbangala warriors, and freed slaves, across rivers swollen by the rains, and laid siege to Matamba, overthrowing its king and transforming the kingdom into her new base of operations. By relocating her court to Matamba, she created a sanctuary for Africans fleeing Portuguese enslavement, establishing a system where escaped slaves were granted land and military training in exchange for pledges of loyalty. Her administration in Matamba blossomed. She adopted European-style bureaucracy while preserving traditional rituals to legitimize her rule among local populations. Through a mixture of diplomatic acumen, martial innovation, and religious maneuvering, Nzinga orchestrated a multifaceted resistance that confounded Portuguese authorities for decades. She defied conventional gender roles by leading troops in battle during the Battle of Vumbu, mounting her war horse at the front lines, rallying her soldiers with impassioned speeches invoking ancestral spirits to bolster morale. The Portuguese, frustrated by their inability to capture or break her, resorted to brutal scorched earth campaigns, burning villages and crucifying captured Mbangala as warnings. Yet Nzinga persisted. She relocated her court multiple times to evade sieges, negotiated temporary truces to regroup and rearm, and leveraged her alliances to force the Portuguese to reconsider direct conquest. In doing so, she laid bare the weaknesses of a colonial power reliant on rigid supply lines and unfamiliar terrain, while demonstrating that African agency, when united under a resolute leader, could effectively counter European incursions. Her resistance strategies, melding indigenous warfare, European diplomacy, and religious symbolism, remain studied today as one of the earliest successful anti-colonial movements in sub-Saharan Africa. After more than 3 decades of near-constant conflict, Nzinga finally brokered a formal peace treaty with the Portuguese in 1656 that recognized Matamba's autonomy in exchange for limiting slave exports from her territories and allowing a small Portuguese garrison in Alamba. While the terms appeared to benefit Lisbon, they effectively secured Nzinga's sovereignty and protected her people from further immediate enslavement or forced labor. She spent her final years strengthening administrative structures in Matamba. She instituted taxation systems based on agricultural yields rather than forced levies, organized a council of ministers, some of whom, like her niece Nyaleka and nephew Ndumwe, were given military commands, and encouraged trade diversification, sending caravans of ivory, beeswax, and ostrich feathers northward toward Congo and southward to Mombasa via Swahili Arab traders. Nzinga also became a patron of the arts, commissioning netsos, sculptural carvings depicting her victories, and sponsoring chants of praise that celebrated Matamba's resilience. Upon her death in 1663, at approximately 80 years of age, her body was laid to rest in a mausoleum that became a pilgrimage site for those who honored her memory. Her successor, Queen Mukemba, inherited a kingdom that, although diminished in population due to decades of war, remained fiercely independent. In the centuries that followed, Nzinga's story was passed down through oral traditions of the Mbundu peoples and eventually entered European accounts through Jesuit letters that mixed admiration with condescension. During the 19th and 20th centuries, Angolan nationalists resurrected Nzinga's legacy as a symbol of anti-colonial resistance, likening her struggle against Portugal to their own battles against Portuguese rule. In modern Angola, she is enshrined on currency, school curricula, and national holidays such as National Women's Day, reflecting her status as an icon of female leadership and anti-imperialist defiance. Beyond Angola's borders, scholars have examined her reign to challenge Eurocentric narratives that portray African societies as passive victims. Nzinga's deft political maneuvering, combined with her willingness to adapt, adopting European armaments, forging alliances with other empires, and utilizing Christian ritual language, dispelled myths that African resistance lacked sophistication. More recently, feminists and post-colonial theorists have reclaimed Nzinga as a symbol of intersectional power. A woman who rejected patriarchal norms to assert authority in both male-dominated African courts and hostile European diplomatic spheres. Her tactics have informed modern strategies of diplomatic resistance, cultural preservation, and grassroots militancy, illustrating that true sovereignty emerges from a delicate balance of cultural authenticity and adaptive innovation. In diaspora communities across Brazil, Portugal, France, and the United States, activists draw on Nzinga's legacy to advocate for racial justice, indigenous rights, and gender equality, often wearing attire or carrying banners emblazoned with her likeness to evoke her unyielding spirit. Nzinga's life teaches us that leadership grounded in humility. She famously said, "I will not rest until my ancestors are happy," combined with unflinching courage in the face of overwhelming odds, can reshape the destiny of a people. Her story reminds us today that decolonization is not merely a political process, but also a cultural and spiritual reclamation, in which language, faith, and artistic expression become weapons against oppression. As we look to current global struggles, whether indigenous land rights, women's empowerment, or anti-racist movements, we find echoes of Nzinga's resolve to negotiate when possible, to unify disparate forces under a shared vision, and, when necessary, to stand firm in the open field of conflict. In honoring her memory, we embrace a legacy that challenges us to refuse subjugation, leverage every available tool for justice, and uphold the dignity of all peoples in a world still shaped by the aftershocks of imperialism. Queen Nzinga's story is not merely a distant tale of 17th century Africa. It is a timeless testament to the power of unwavering conviction, strategic brilliance, and cultural pride. She refused to bow, she forged potent alliances, and she redefined leadership for future generations. As you reflect on her legacy, remember that the fight for justice and sovereignty is as relevant today as it was in Ndongo's royal courts. If Nzinga's courage and vision have inspired you, please like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel. The History of the World, for more deep dives into the extraordinary figures who shaped our past and who continue to influence our present. Together, let's keep these stories alive.